Professor, what is a threshold in marketing?
Sure, today, I will explain the marketing term threshold. It's very difficult, but also very practical, so please listen carefully. What does threshold mean? Threshold, in the dictionary meaning, refers to a piece of wood, metal, or stone that you must walk over when entering a room or building. In the figurative meaning, it can be understood as a limit, a critical value, that must be crossed or overcome in order to progress from one stage to the next, or as a starting point from which something new begins, or a reference point for any changes. For example, the audible frequency range for humans refers to the range that people can hear with their ears, which has a lower limit and an upper limit. If the frequency is too low or too high, it cannot be heard. This is called the threshold of hearing. In psychology, the minimum amount of stimulus that people can perceive when receiving external stimuli is called the threshold. In marketing, marketers and advertisers apply and use it a lot when setting prices or advertising.
Professor, I now understand the term threshold.
To understand threshold, you need to understand 4 terms. The 4 terms are absolute threshold, difference threshold, subliminal perception, and Weber's law. Absolute threshold refers to the minimum level of stimulus that people can perceive. When people receive certain stimuli, they must be above the absolute criterion to be able to perceive it. So, this is called absolute threshold. For example, when advertising, advertisers should advertise to exceed the minimum level of stimulus that people can perceive, so that they can get the advertising effect. Therefore, advertisers need to advertise beyond the absolute threshold to achieve advertising effect. Difference threshold, on the other hand, refers to the minimum level of stimulus that can discriminate between 2 stimuli. In other words, the difference threshold refers to the size of the stimulus that can detect the difference between the 2 stimuli. In this sense, it is also called just noticeable difference, abbreviated as JND. For example, if a cafe raises the price of coffee by 99 cents, consumers will not be aware of it, but if the cafe raises the price by $1, consumers will recognize it. Therefore, the difference threshold, or the just noticeable difference, JND, will be $1. I will explain more about the JND in detail. If the current price of a product is $100 and you want to raise it by an amount that consumers cannot perceive, how much should you increase it by? According to a consumer survey, the price that consumers do not perceive a price difference is below $120. In this case, the difference between the 2 prices, $20, becomes the difference threshold. Therefore, when you want to increase the price, there can be 2 strategies. The first strategy is to increase the price to a level that customers do not notice. The other strategy is to increase the price to a level that customers do notice. To raise the price to a level that customers do not notice, you only need to increase it by less than the difference threshold, specifically by $119.99. For products like hamburger or milk, which are popular among the public, it is desirable to increase the price by an amount below the difference threshold, even when raising prices. The second strategy is to raise the price above the difference threshold, i.e., $120 or more, so that customer notices it. For example, when you launch a new product, you improve the performance so that customers notice it and increase the price accordingly. Customers will also recognize the difference in performance before and after upgrading the product, and will accept the price increase. Additionally, I will explain subliminal perception. The subliminal perception means that stimuli are perceived by the subconscious mind, even though customers are not consciously aware of them because their size is smaller than the absolute threshold. As you can see on the screen, the minimum stimulus that consumers can perceive is called the absolute threshold. So when advertising, it must exceed the absolute threshold to achieve advertising effect. If an advertisement falls short of absolute threshold, consumers are unconsciously aware of the advertisement, although they are not consciously aware of it. This is called the subliminal perception, and advertising utilizing this is called subliminal advertisements. To elaborate on the subconscious advertisements, when a small advertisement is inserted in a scene of a drama or movie, the audience may not consciously perceive the existence of the advertisement, but subconsciously perceive it. It is also called subconscious advertisements because it is perceived subconsciously. A well-known example of a subliminal advertisement is an experiment conducted by a market researcher named James Vickery in the United States in 1957. He experimented by exposing a small text saying, "Drink Coca-Cola and eat popcorn," on the large screen in a movie theater for 0.0003 seconds, repeatedly at 5-second intervals. As a result of the experiment conducted on 45,000 people for 6 weeks, the sales of popcorn increased by 58%, and the sales of Coca-Cola increased by 18% after the movie ended. It is a representative experiment that shows subconscious perception, even though it is not consciously perceived. There may be many subliminal advertisements applied around us. Finally, we introduce Weber's law. Earlier, I explained that JND is the magnitude of a stimulus that can detect a difference between two stimuli. Here, Weber's law is the theory that the JND is not always fixed in absolute magnitude, but is determined relative to the magnitude of the previous stimulus. In other words, Weber's law is a theory that in order for consumers to recognize the difference, if the previous stimulus was large, the next stimulus must be greater than this, and if the previous stimulus was small, the next stimulus may be small. Weber's law was discovered by Ernst Weber, a German scientist in the 19th century, and is widely used in psychology and marketing. In marketing, Weber's law can be applied to price increases and changes in product packaging. For example, consumers are less likely to perceive a price increase from $100 to $105, but they readily perceive a price increase from $20 to $25. The reason is that even if the same amount increases, if the original price is higher, it is less recognized, and if the original price is lower, it is easily recognized. Another example is product packaging. Even if the packaging of a famous maker changes slightly, consumers do not perceive the change. On the other hand, if small companies' packaging changes a little, consumers easily recognize them. If a famous maker changes the brand rather than the packaging, consumers will easily perceive the change. As such, Weber's law is a theory that can be applied to actual marketing, so marketers should use it well. A comprehensive summary of what has been explained so far is as follows. The absolute threshold refers to the minimum stimulus that allows people to notice a certain stimulus, and the difference threshold refers to the minimum stimulus that allows people to discriminate between two stimuli. Therefore, difference threshold is also called JND. Subliminal perception means that stimuli are perceived by the subconscious mind even though customers are not consciously aware of them, because their size is smaller than the absolute threshold. Therefore, advertising utilizing subliminal perception is referred to as subliminal advertisements or subconscious advertisements. Weber's law states that in order to discriminate between the previous stimulus and the next stimulus in the difference threshold, the next stimulus must be greater than the previous stimulus. In other words, the magnitude of the stimulus that can discriminate between two stimuli is not an absolute magnitude, but a relative magnitude.
Professor, despite the slightly difficult vocabulary today, I understand threshold now. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you understand. Marketing is a useful field of study, so if you study hard, it will be of great help. Please keep up studying hard.